All right, so let's talk about something fascinating today. We're going to dive into a pretty unique way of looking at societal crises. The whole idea is that to really get what's happening out there in the world, we might need to start by looking a little closer, like in our own neighborhoods, maybe even in our own homes. Okay, let's get into it. So, when I ask a question like this, where does your mind immediately go? For most of us, right, it jumps straight to the big global stage. We think about the major headlines, international conflicts, all those huge power struggles we see on the news. And yeah, these are the usual suspects, right? These are the names that pop up in almost every conversation about injustice on a global scale. We see them as the big players, the sources of all the trouble. But what if that's not the whole picture? The source we're exploring today suggests we might be missing a really crucial piece of the puzzle.
And this is the twist. This is the big pivot. The perspective we're digging into asks us to completely shift our focus, to zoom in from the geopolitical all the way down to the personal. What if the massive problems we see out there are actually just a mirror reflecting something that's happening much, much closer to home?
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this shift, we have to start with a key term. The word is zalim. Now, that's often translated as tyrant or oppressor, but for this argument, we need to think about it in a much, much broader way. So, a zalim isn't just some dictator in a faraway country. In this view, it's anyone who does something wrong, whether it's big or small. It's about crossing a line, violating someone else's rights, usually for your own personal gain. And this is where the idea becomes so powerful, because it's incredibly relatable. We're talking about the contractor who knowingly uses cheap paint to pocket a little extra cash, or the sibling who schemes to get the best part of an inheritance, or even a spouse who just neglects their partner. All these everyday actions, they're born from a little bit of greed, a little selfishness, and they all fall under this umbrella of wrongdoing. And it goes even deeper. Think about this. If even revered figures like prophets could look at themselves and say, "Yep, I've been one of the wrongdoers," then it totally reframes the whole concept. Zalim stops being an accusation you throw at other people, and it becomes a reason for self-reflection. It's about a potential that exists inside every single one of us.
Okay, so if these little individual acts of wrongdoing are happening all around us, all the time, how does that add up? How does that actually affect society as a whole? Well, that brings us to the next big idea, what's called a societal pressure test.
The source material uses this word, baskı, which translates to pressure. And this isn't just, a run-of-the-mill hardship. It's seen as a very specific kind of test that puts an entire society under immense strain. And its purpose isn't just to punish, it's to reveal what's really hiding under the surface, and to show everyone's true character when the chips are down. I mean, just think about the last few years. It's a perfect example. The COVID pandemic brought this pressure of isolation and this urge to escape. Then the devastating earthquakes in Turkey created this intense pressure of fear, making people want to relocate. And now the ongoing global conflicts and the social polarization, they create this pressure to just pick a side. According to this view, these aren't just random separate events. They're a sequence, parts of the same ongoing pressure test. And what's our natural human reaction when that pressure starts to build and build? We run. It's our first instinct. We saw people flee the cities during the pandemic. We saw people making plans to move halfway across the country after the earthquakes. We just want to get away from whatever is making us uncomfortable and find safety somewhere else. But here's the kicker. What if running is completely missing the point? This leads to a really powerful argument from our source, that this escape is actually futile. You just can't outrun a test that's designed for you. The source points to this specific verse from the Quran, which pretty much says it directly. Do not flee. Instead, it says, go back to the very things you're comfortable with, your home, your stuff, your luxuries, because that's where the real test is. That's where you'll be held accountable. And this brings us to a really crucial, almost ironic question. If a person became a wrongdoer, cut some corners, stepped on a few people, to get that nice house, that fancy car, that certain status, why would you then abandon all of it at the first sign of trouble? The argument here is that the test is fundamentally connected to the things we value, and more importantly, how we got them in the first place. So all of this leads to the absolute heart of the message. When we're faced with the consequences of these pressure tests, there are really two ways to go, two completely different kinds of confessions we can make. So on one side, you have the confession of ruin. This is the last-minute cry of, oh no, we were wrongdoers, that only comes when the walls are already crumbling down. It's too late. It's just regret. But then there's the confession of awareness. This is saying, wait, we have become wrongdoers. See the difference? It's proactive. It's an admission of responsibility spoken before it's too late. And that's a path toward healing, not a cry of despair. And that right there is the proposed solution in its simplest, most powerful form. The way out of these never-ending cycles of crisis, whether they're personal or societal, starts by looking in the mirror. It's about taking ownership, stopping the blame game, and admitting our own part in the problem. So we'll leave you with this to think about. When you look at the pressures in your own life, the stress, the fear, the conflicts, what are they really revealing? What truths about yourself and maybe about the world right around you are they forcing to the surface? Thanks for tuning in.